Hey guys, welcome to the first portfolio review. I am super excited about this. The whole idea behind this is that hopefully I can help more than one designer at a time. I remember when I was just a bootcamp graduate and I was looking for my first role and working on my portfolio, it was super helpful for me to listen to what others had as advice or feedback for another designer, just so I can see what was good, what was bad, what are some of the things I had to aim for when creating my portfolio. So I spoke to Alanna. I hope I'm saying your name right. And she wanted some feedback on some of the case studies. We're going to dive specifically into, so to speak, and BizMiner. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Take anything anyone says with a grain of salt because everyone has something different to say. Everyone has different opinions of what a good portfolio is, what a bad portfolio is. The main thing that would help you distinguish what to follow, what not to follow, is figure out why they said it, right? Why does it say to get rid of personas? Why did they say to show more research? Why did they say XYZ? Once you figure out that why, then you'll be able to solve that problem in your own way that best fits your case study. Because at the end of the day, you know your case study the best, you know your product the best, and you know what's information is important to share and what's not. So yes, so definitely take everything I say with a grain of salt. And with that, let's dive in. Okay, so here we are in Soda Speak. Just to give a quick overview of how this page is laid out so far, it is a quick snapshot or screen of the final product, so to speak, what it's about, some overview containing like a problems, the solution of the outcomes, and then her role, toolbox, and then here she goes on with the process. So like understanding the problems and listing out the research, the solutions, and then what she learned. I think some of the things that are really working well is one, I like the consistency of the color. So like between the color of this, the highlighting or the underlining, to even like the tone of the green to this like orange, it's all consistent and it kind of creates like one color story, which is important in terms of like the UI. When there's too many like colors going on or colors are clashing, it tend to make it look not put together but also overwhelming. So I like that. Another thing is I do like the visual hierarchy. So when I say visual hierarchy, there's a lot that goes into it. But one is the size of the font. Like I can clearly tell what's the header, what's the body. I also love that you bolded out specific things that you want us to read first, right? So making it scannable. That I loved, like including here spacing, just like ample amount of spacing so that it's not too overwhelming for me. Like my eyes have time to breathe. It has time to breathe in between each one. So I love the visual hierarchy. I love the usage of quotes. I think quotes really go a long way, especially when you're talking about the user. Because at the end, if it's their exact words, it really shows what the problem is, communicate what the problem is, or what is the problem that you found. I love that you put it in container boxes. So again, that goes into visual hierarchy. I can easily tell what's one to another. I love the fact that you didn't use a lot of different fonts and different sizes. You kind of stuck to like what I see, maybe three, maybe pushing it four, I think. I see like three, which again, that goes into making it consistent, not too busy, not too overwhelming. All of the little fun backgrounds, I think visually those are fun, and then also like a final product. Love that you put in what you learned. Every recruiter or every designer that I talked to said that they like reading this section to see like what you learned and maybe like what you could do better. Okay, so some of the things that I wanted to address, and then this is going to be a very high level, is the storytelling. So storytelling is a huge part of the portfolio and the case study. The ability to tell the story of the product is really big because for multiple reasons, right? One of them is the better the storytelling is, the more engaging it is, the more you're able to communicate your points, which is very important in terms of your portfolio, your interview, your presentation, and whatnot. But also, that's a skill that you need in order to talk to stakeholders and to bring them along the journey of or your vision of the product, right? That's a skill that's necessary within the job too. So being able to tell the story of your product is a extremely big part about it. Now, what is storytelling? I'll be honest, I don't have a single definition. I feel like every single person in this industry have their own definition of it. But to sum up what my idea and what I took from all of my conversations and my research about it is to help the user, to bring the user along in the creation of the product, right? As the product was building, helping them connect the dots between each sections and to like literally bring them along the journey as if they were watching from the outside as the product was being built. So in terms of this case study, and this is very common in a lot of entry level designers, including my portfolio too. My portfolio lacked the storytelling, and once I implemented the storytelling, that's when I started seeing a huge amount of results and callbacks. And really, actually, that's the first time I started seeing any responses to my applications. So the thing about storytelling is a lot goes into it. It really is like a beast of its own. But the main thing and the biggest thing is showing the why and the how behind the what. And for entry level designers, and again, this was my biggest mistake, is we're so busy trying to show the what. So what is the what? It's the tools, the persona, the competitive analysis, the user interview, wireframes, user flows, like prototypes, all that. That's the what. And we're so busy trying to prove that we can do the what that we forget how important the why and the how is. So of course we can do personas and wireframes and sketches and usability testing. Like that's literally the minimum someone has to know in order to qualify for entry level design job. But what they're looking for, what the hiring manager and the recruiter is looking for, is way beyond the what. It's the how and the why. Like, why do you do certain things? And how did you get that done? So the reason why that's important is because every designer, every person, every researcher is going to digest information different. They're going to come up with different solutions. So if you were to give, let's say, 100 designers the same exact problem, I guarantee that they're all going to be, most of them are going to be different, right? There might be like 50 to 80 different type of solutions. Maybe it's variations, maybe it's completely different. But my point is that everyone's brain works differently. If you were to give the same research to 100 different designers, they're all going to pick apart different parts. Some of them are going to resonate with one part. Some of them are going to resonate with a different part. Some people they're just able to dig deep, ask the right questions, and understand the core problem that they're trying to solve. Some people, doesn't really have a knack for that. So they'll only ask like surface level questions, and then they only get surface level problems, and then they kind of trying to solve for that, which essentially becomes a band-aid, right? They're just slapping on band-aids over band-aids. So showing all of that, showing all of like the how your brain works, why do you do what you do? Why did you do what you did? Is a really big important part. And that's really like the biggest thing that's missing from this case study. And again, it's missing from like 99% of entry level's case study. Because in a boot camp, I forget which boot camp you came from, but I graduated from Springboard. And in Springboard, we were taught how to build a portfolio, as in like break down the process. You understood. So you had to do some secondary research and then show them your customer, your competitive analysis, and then kind of list like what we did, like the tools we use. But we were never really taught to dig deep and to really communicate like why, right? Like we were never taught that why and the how is really, really important. How is that applicable to case studies? So I went ahead and I read all the details, and hopefully I understood the project, or the hopefully I understood the project correctly. But pretty much there was an issue of conversion. So only 5% of users that downloaded converted to paid subscribers. So that's what we're trying to solve. And so at first you did some research to understand the problem. And in order to do that, you collected some data. Okay, so there was no, prior to this project, there was no data or analytics available. So from your research with unmoderated testing, the following was discovered. So you discovered this. There was no data before, and you understood that having data is important. So you went ahead and you collected these. Okay. And then there's your heuristic analysis of their current product and what the issues were. And then you did some guerrilla testing. And then through the testing, you've had a couple of really great insights. So from those insights, you uncover some of like the bigger problems, right? Some of the bigger problems being that they want to communicate between them and the child, that they don't feel like the current app is doing that, and the participants are concerned of their child's safety, but they don't feel like the app is really doing much to address that. So I I remember reading somewhere here. Okay, here. So these insights gave you an inspiration to create a separate app for the parents. So currently there's one that exists for the kids, right? That's the kids. And then one but then now you said, oh, according to my research and my interviews, no, we actually need a second app, and these are for the parents. I needed some usability, and with the usability, you came up with a couple of issues which you solved, and now this is your final. Okay, so that's what I learned from your product. The problem is, I wouldn't have known if I didn't read all of this. And I promise you, the recruiters don't have time. It's not like they don't want to read it. It's they don't have time to read all of this, because some of them, depending on the size of the company and how many people applied, but some of them have hundreds, or even like 50 portfolio is a lot to read. So a couple of things that I took out from this is, one, how do you communicate what you want to communicate in a very scannable way? And there's a bunch of ways to do that. I'll go into that in a little bit. So that's the first one: how to make it scannable, and yet give enough context and give enough information around the things that you want to communicate. Number two is, I think that your product has a very strong story. It's very interesting the way that it was created, but I don't necessarily am getting that through your storytelling, through the things that you've decided to prioritize, things that you bolded. And so I wanted to share my thoughts on, if this were my project, like how would I go about telling that story and what I thought it was interesting. So there's two part of that. Let's start with the second point, just because it covers more like a higher level point. So when I was saying that your product it has a very interesting story, but I'm not getting it from your storytelling. What I mean is that it's not, some of the things that you decided to highlight, I felt like was less important than some of the story. So what do I mean by that? So right here in this case study, you are breaking it down by process. The first thing you did was the first thing in the process, which is understanding the problem. And in order to do that, you collected some data and analytics, right? And after you did that, you did some research methods. But let's start breaking it down by the progress of the product and how the product was created. So what I mean by that is, all right, cool. So you collected some data and some analytics. Cool, you're understanding the current experience, but why? Why are these important? Why are these numbers so important? And you kind of indirectly stated it through here. And I think this is so much more important because this really tells the story behind this product. So the fact that like there was no data to begin with, no analytics, nothing. You knew that it was important to understand where the frictions were, where they were falling off, where really the problem areas, in order to really figure out where to focus in, because otherwise it could be anything, right? So you took the initiative to do some research and do some unmoderated testing to discover the following. That is the story of the product, right? You didn't do a data analytics just because the process said so. No, you needed the data to understand where to focus, where to design, where to solve, or figure out what the problem is, or XYZ. So if you highlight this and like this says a lot, I think that would be a more successful storytelling because it's literally telling the story of the product, right? It's not doing like, hey, I did data analytics because my bootcamp told me to, and I know it's the right thing and it's part of the process, so we'll just do it just to do it. No, you had a reason, it has a purpose. And that is the story behind the researching part of your product. So I hope that makes sense. And like right here, this says a lot more than you would normally think. Um, the fact that there was no data analytics means that, well, no, the fact that there was no data and you took the initiative to gather some data, it says that you understand that collecting data and researching and understanding the problem and breaking it down is important. And that says a lot about who you are as a designer. That says a lot more about who you are as a designer and how your brain works versus this. So another example is right here. So you did some guerrilla testing, and you got really cool insights out of it. Main two big ones are being these two. So they're wanting to improve the communication between them and their child, and they don't feel like the current app is doing that. And also they're concerned with the child's safety, and the current app is not really quite addressing that. So based on these insights, you were inspired to create a separate app for the parents. And that is such a huge turning point. It's so interesting that your solution to it was a whole new app, right? It's very interesting that you were able to uncover a really big insight, which is there's actually two distinct users. Before there was only one. Before there was only the child, right? The kid, and that's what they were using. But the second user is actually the parents. And for you to come with that solution where you really took a step back, you did your research, and you're like, okay, no, there's two distinct users. And right now, we only have a solution for what the kid will do, but we actually don't have a solution for what the parents' problems, right? The problems that the parents are dealing with, the things that the parents are looking to solve. And because that's missing, my solution was to create a separate app. That is such a big part of the story, and it is not being highlighted. And the reason why I said that is a big part of the story, again, it's less about guerrilla testing. It's more about what did the guerrilla testing do to your product, to the end product? How did it contribute? Why did you do it? What did you get out of it? And well, more like how did you utilize the information, right? Because data and research is only as good as what you're going to do with them. And what you did with them was actually come up with a separate app which will solve for all other issues that you've been mentioning throughout your case study. And I think once you start highlighting that and that turning point, that becomes a really big part of your story. Again, it's not breaking it down by process, but breaking it down by the creation of the product. So now, if you were to highlight that part, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but me who's looking at your portfolio is going to get several things. One of them is, okay, she is able to gather the correct, informations, ask the correct things, and then understand really what the core problem is. And her solution isn't some like dumb band-aid solution that will, never really quite solve the issue. Instead, you're able to come up with a out of the box solution. Honestly, I don't know if you were to give the same things to another 100 designers, how many of them will come up with a separate app, right? Not everyone, because again, everyone's brain looks differently. Yours worked this way, and you thought that this was the best. So yeah, I think that would have been a really great thing. So that idea of that storytelling can be implemented in every part of your thing. So, I would go back and each section I would ask myself, why did I do this? Like, why did I do it? And to talk about the what you got out of it and how did you utilize that information? How did you do it? Or, how did you get that done or XYZ? Um So that kind of wraps up like the second point. I hope all of that made sense, and I hope it is very helpful. Um, let's see. So another thing about storytelling is I see a disconnect here, and let me explain it. Okay, so you have your, so to speak, overview, what they're about. But now there's a couple of things that don't fit, and it's disconnecting, and it's making me confused. Is some of the information that you decide to include, whether it's a placement, whether it's including at all. So every time I did a edit on my portfolio, just kidding, not every time. The last time I edited my portfolio, which gave me a lot of results, was to go back to each little section and ask myself, why did I put this in? What am I trying to communicate through this? And am I successfully communicating what I want to communicate? Is it relevant? And does it, is it relevant to that specific section? And that helped me kind of take apart the unnecessary and really focus on the story. So what I mean by that is, for example, this part right here, so to speak. Okay, so you're giving us a quick sneak peek or soda peek, and then you're talking about, so you're improving an onboarding flow. Okay, and then the product focus on encouraging. All right, so here, right here, there's already a disconnect. You're saying two different things. Right here, you're talking about the task that you are doing. The second part is you're talking about who, so to speak, is. So now you're talking about two complete different things that are not correlated. So that kind of goes in with a very inconsistent storytelling, and now it becomes like that inconsistency in terms of like the topics throughout makes the storytelling more convoluted and more confusing. So personally, again, this is with a grain of salt. I'm not saying do this. I'm just giving an example of what I mean, and one, of the many possible ways to address this. And of course, all of this, again, I'm going to say it over and over again. I'm making it up. You know your product best. You know exactly what you want to communicate. I'm just, again, making up a example just to communicate what I'm trying to say. So with that said, I would move this down to here, and I'll explain why. All right, so this little snippet, right? Again, going back to like, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to communicate? So in this section, what am I trying to communicate? I want to give a sneak peek of what so to speak is, so that I can give the viewer, aka recruiter and hiring manager, a context of so to speak, so that as I talk about so to speak, they understand it, right? So then that's why I would remove this, because this isn't talking about what so to speak is. This is talking about your task and why you were brought on as a UX designer. So I would just focus on explaining what so to speak is in a very short, succinct way. So moving that down here. Now in the overview, I saw a little disconnect here too. So problem. Okay, perfect. Yes, I want to talk about the problem, right? Because that's the main thing about being a UX designer, always solving problems. So there's a conversion problem, and then the company doesn't collect user information. So there's no analytics that are available. This right here, you're talking about the problem that you're solving, which is perfect. This right here, you're talking about the problem that you faced when trying to solve for the problem. And that doesn't necessarily belong in this section. Because again, what are you trying to communicate? You're trying to communicate what the problem you were solving for. So that's the what. And this was just one of the many difficulties you faced. So I would remove that. Plus, that right here, you've already addressed in this section. So it's not like you're missing out on the information. So I would remove that, only focus on this. And then next would be your task. If you want to include it, that's where this would belong. So that's the issue. Your task was now to improve the onboarding flow. And then the outcome. So the outcome here too, So conducting research and creating clickable prototypes and all the fun stuff, that's not an outcome. That is the tools and what you did to get the outcome. The outcome was a more efficient onboarding, or a more, friendly onboarding, or more educational onboarding, that increased the conversion to paid subscribers by 40%. That is the outcome. So this right here doesn't belong there. So little details like that is what breaks the storytelling apart, because now it's telling the viewer's brain two complete separate things. And for them, for someone who doesn't know the product, it just doesn't make sense, right? How are they can't connect the dots. Another thing about storytelling, again, it's like it's you're supposed to, our job is connecting the dots for them. This happened, so I did this, I did that. And then there's this section, which is more like a testimony of your work, which is great. It doesn't belong there, because again, it's breaking the story apart, right? Because you're talking about, all right, what you need to do in the story of your product, story of the product, testimony. All right, let's get back to now the story of the product. It's like the viewers have to switch their brains in order to read the section. So if you want to include it, then this belongs all the way in the bottom, where there's the wrap up and reflections and whatnot, like all the way at the end here. Okay. And then I'm just gonna break down this one more part of the story, because these are examples. You just take exactly the questions that I asked, and really asking yourself like what I'm trying to communicate to the rest of this portfolio, and it'll hopefully help a lot. So another part about the story I was talking about was here. All right, cool. So I got to know your role. Okay, I got to know the tools you used and some of the problems. All right, now let's get to understanding the problem. Okay, giving kids smartphones for the first time is overwhelming for parents. Now I'm double confused, because I thought the problem that you're trying to solve is the conversion rate, because that's what your problem statement says. But now you're saying you're trying to understand the problem of giving kids smartphones the first time is overwhelming for parents. And you're talking about why, so to speak, exist. What do they do? So it's now my brain is asking, wait, so are you trying to solve for the problem that, so to speak, is solving for, which is trying to make it less overwhelming for parents to give their kids, smartphones for the first time? Or are you solving for the conversion plan, the conversion rates, and making the onboarding better? Right? There's a disconnect. And my best guess is you were sharing what, so to speak, is, and or maybe you were trying to understand the users and the purpose and the like the point of, so to speak, so that you can understand how to make the onboarding better. And if that's the case, then it's not quite getting what is it, communicated through this. So if, let's say, I'm right and you're just trying to say, no, I decided to understand our users, understands our product better, then this should be about understanding the product, and then why you thought understanding the product was important, right? It's important to understand the product so I can empathize with the users, blah 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 blah. Then that would be more relevant to it, and then you're moving on. So that's what I mean by like storytelling. I hope all of that made sense. Last thing, I'm gonna just skim. I'm gonna skim over the point one. Only because I think once you really dive into the second point that I was talking about, a lot of this will change. So I don't want to dive too much into details that something that will possibly change. But going back to the first point I made early on was a lot of paragraphs. So the thing about paragraphs is, yes, sometimes you cannot avoid them, right? We have to explain what we did, but they're not scannable. So if a recruiter came in here, it's very hard to understand anything about the usability test unless she reads all of this. And I know you highlighted some of the bold, but like this isn't as scannable. So our job is to make it as easy as possible for the hiring managers and the recruiters to digest and to take away informations quickly and ideally almost instantaneously. And how do we do that is first keep in mind that we have two users, right? We have the recruiter and we have the hiring managers. The recruiters, they need to be able to skim quick, and they can only understand, they don't need to understand the details. They only need to understand the very high levels of what you did, what you're capable of. All right, cool, moving on. The hiring managers need more details, explanations of the why you did things. And the way we do that is breaking down our information in a very organized and utilizing visual hierarchy, so that if the recruiter who spends 30 seconds, if you're lucky, maybe a minute on your case study, if they scan through it just on the big titles and maybe one or two blurbs or an image or two, they can understand how you work in the process, right? So if you were to like, all right, like here's a great example, understanding a problem, giving kids smartphones the first time is overwhelming. They don't need to read the rest of this to understand what the rest of this is about. That's what this accomplished, right? Visual hierarchy, right? The first thing that eye goes to is this big header, which we know it's a header because there's an underline, it's big, it's bold, it's in capitals, and then like a summary or whatever it is. So same thing. Same thing through like here, let's say heuristic analysis. Even though these images are way too small, so they don't really quite do the job, but let's say the images were large enough for them to just see it, they can just say, hey, heuristic analysis, all right, they took away 1, 2, 3, perfect, moving on. And then just like this section, now we give enough information for the hiring manager. So recruiter goes, all right, skimming, got it, next skimming. A hiring manager will probably go skimming, all right, skimming. All right, you know what? This is actually, I am interested. Let's go back. And then they might read, all right, I'm going to read more about this. And now they have the option to be able to delve into details. So keep that in mind. Those are the two users that we're designing for. Now, in terms of getting rid of like the paragraphs, there are a couple of things. The first thing is most obvious thing is to reduce the words, right? Really like asking yourself, all right, what is like main things? If I could only highlight like a couple of words or one sentence, what would it be? And that's your most important things, and then really ask yourself if the rest of them you need. So for example, this right here, their product focuses on encouraging empathy with voice messaging and empowering parents with giving their child a smart device for the first time. Okay, so this purpose again was to give a sneak peek or a context of what SodaSpeak is. So if that's the case, then you don't need to say that it's, encouraging empathy and voice messaging and empowering parents. Really, all you need is a what is it? I mean, it's not going to be English when I say it, but something along the lines of a children's messaging app where empowers parents. I don't know, when giving their whatever it is. that was not English. But like that's all you need. A quick sum of what SodaSpeak is. You don't really need to focus on like what's the point of saying there's is voice messages. Like that information is not really as important when giving a high level of what SodaSpeak is SodaSpeak is about. If you're diving into details, yeah, details matters. But right here, all it is high level. So yeah, that's number one. Like here, currently 5% of users that download the SodaSpeak app end up converting to paid subscribers. You don't have to put in the word currently because it's given, right? That's a problem. That means that it's a problem that's currently happening. That's why they brought you on. And maybe this is important. Maybe it's not. But if it's not, then you could even get rid of download. Like 5% of SodaSpeak or 5% of users end up converting to paid subscribers. That's more than enough. And again, now you reduced it. So that's number one, very obvious, reducing the text. Number two is breaking the text apart in visuals. And what I mean by visuals, it means not just like images and pictures, but like you broke it down here visually. Even though this I feel like can be shortened, you broke it down visually. I can see the percentage, and then I can see what the percentage is about. You broke it down here, right? Putting a box around. You broke it down visually. Where are you? Like here, you put them in its own containers, making it distinguished from the rest. Or you can use bulletin. Bulletin is a great way. Um, or you can use like actual visuals. Like there's a reason why we're showing the app. Imagine trying to describe this app in words. No, it's better to show it in a visual sense. That's why you put it here, right? Same thing. You could do that here too. So let's see. Let's see, like here, for example, let's break this down. First, I tested the current SodaSpeak with 10 users and see how many. I asked questions to get an idea of what the app's purpose and their biggest concerns were giving a child for the first time. Convert to paid subscribers. Okay. So you can take this whole paragraph and put it into one visual thing. You can say, usability, instead of you saying like usability test, or maybe right under it, say you tested the current onboarding process. So now you're saying that you tested it. Oh, you already says it here. I conducted a moderated usability test through Usability Hub. Okay, perfect. You said it here, so you actually don't need to say it again here. You could even say 10. So I conducted 10 on moderated. So now you got rid of this whole thing, right? And then you can say like my objective, like you say objective dot dot, see how many people would convert to paid subscribers. And then most of the users said that they wouldn't purchase the app. Okay, so you can sum up this whole thing by saying 7 out of 10 users said they would not pay for the app because they thought it was just a regular phone messaging app with kid-friendly features. So they didn't understand the product. All of this could be taken down into like a sentence or two. And then maybe in close that in a little box right here, like this, like one, how you did it in another section, like here, like one, blah, 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 blah. And the same thing you could do here, like two, blah, 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 three, blah, blah. That will break this text apart and make it easier. I think that's, I think that's kind of, I think you can apply the same concept to everything here. And again, there's like a million ways to do it. The way I went about it was I just looked at a bunch of other portfolios and see how best they did it. So if I were like, all right, I really need to break this paragraph apart for usability test, and then I would look at other portfolios, specifically their usability test and how they laid out the information, and then I would pick apart. I'm like, oh, I love the way she did this because it helps clearly state XYZ, so I'm going to take that part of it, but I don't like this. But here, another portfolio I see that it does perfectly, so then you kind of adapt that. And then now you get this portfolio that's super scannable, easy to digest. So those were, I know they're very big, high level, but I think they were very interesting to, very important to address. So I'm going to just wrap it up with that. I hope that all of this was not too overwhelming. If there's anything that you were confused about, or if I didn't make sense, please, you can always message me in LinkedIn and I can clarify. But thank you so much for submitting your portfolio. I hope that it helps you a lot, and also it helped out everyone else who is watching this video. So thank you so much, guys. Bye.